This episode of Musket Matters is brought to you by the Vortex Ball Roller, the fastest way to prepare your round ball ammunition. Find out more at www.fourth-armory.com. Howdy folks, today we are going to take a look at how to replace the front sight post on a Pietta Spiller and Burr replica revolver. Now, like a lot of Civil War reproduction revolvers, and probably the originals also, they tend to shoot very high if you try to shoot them with the sights at, say, 25 yards. So the rule that I've heard bandied about on the internet for these things is the idea was, in period, you'd aim at the man's belt buckle and you'd hit him in the chest or somewhere in between. So these things were not intended as target pistols the way that we typically use them today, say in organizations like the North-South Skirmish Association, where we typically shoot most of our events at 25 yards with a couple at 50 yards, and of course we do individual competitions with paper targets at 25 and 50. So it's important to us that these things shoot to point of aim within that kind of range. And so in order to do that, you have to replace the front sight post. So I've done this on the Colt Walker, I've done it on an 1860 Army, I've done it on a 1858 New Model Army Remington. So today we're going to take a look at how to do it with this Spiller and Burr. And so you can see we've got a small front sight post here, and we're going to have to remove that and fashion ourselves a new post and affix it in place. So to get started, we're going to use our vise. And it's important to protect the barrel finish because we don't want to mark up our nice, pretty new gun. So to do that, I just use a scrap of leather. And we will position our gun to where we can get at that post. And there we go. An engineer friend of mine used to say years ago, if you don't hold on to your work will work you. So it's important that you have a way to stabilize the workpiece so that you can do what you need to do on it. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to lay in some electrical tape around here so that we don't damage the finish while we're working on that front sight post. Alright, so we've got some regular old electrical tape here, and we're going to use this to create a barrier to protect the barrel while we're working on it, because we don't want to damage the nice finish on our new replica revolver. Okay, and with that we have the patient prepped for surgery, so now we can get that front post out of there. Alright, so what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to use a pair of linesman's pliers to try to grip this and twist it and pop it loose. That's what I was able to do on 1858 New Model Army Remington replica revolver. The post appeared to have been soldered in, but I was able to break it loose. I don't know if this is just staked in place or whether it is soldered in place, but we're going to give it a go with the pliers here and see if we can get it to come out. So I'm going to carefully grab it. Not yet. There we go. That doesn't appear to have been soldered, as near as I can tell. So there's our post, and it just twisted right out of the pocket, probably staked in there. So let's get some micrometers and see if we can measure the diameter of the post that we're going to need. Alright, so here's our front sight post. We've got a set of calipers here, and let's see what we're dealing with. 0.118, 0.1175, 118. So just a shade under an eighth of an inch. And so we're going to need some 1/8 inch brass rod to make ourselves a taller front sight post. So I went down to my local hobby shop and I found a nice piece of 1/8 inch brass rod made by K&S Precision Metals, number 8164 brass rod, 1/8 of an inch. So we'll use that as the basis for making our new front sight post. So we'll take our front sight post here, or our stock, and we'll chop off a piece that's more easy to work with. There, and that way we don't have to try to manipulate a great big piece of rod. Now I haven't done the calculations yet to figure out exactly how much taller the front sight post needs to be. There's online calculators where you feed in the range and the sight radius and how far off your point of aim you are, and it'll tell you how much higher your post needs to be. I think ours is going to end up being about 1/4 of an inch. It shoots about 18 inches high at 25 yards off a bench. So we'll see about that later on. For now, I'm just going to give myself a nice generous post. If you look closely here, you can see around the sight post hole where there's this ring stamped into the metal. And that's probably where they used a tool to stake that front sight post in place. And it just deforms the metal of the barrel and squeezes it in around that front sight post. So here's our new front sight post, and it's a little big. It doesn't quite fit. So what we're going to do is we're going to take it and chuck it up in our drill press and press a file up against it and machine that down just a hair until we get a nice tight fit. Alright, so we know we're looking for a 0.118 diameter post, and this is measuring about 0.125 as it should, 1/8 of an inch diameter. So we've got to take a little bit off of it until we hit the diameter we want. Now it's not going to take a lot, so we're going to use real light pressure here with our file. See how we're doing. And we've only taken off about 0.02 of an inch, so we'll keep going. Whoop, 0.118, 117, 117. So we may have overshot our target. Fortunately, we've got more material. Well, I just did a little test fit, and it turns out that I've got a taper to this shaft, of course, because I was bearing more towards the bottom where I wanted it to fit. And in fact, it fits and sticks in the hole in the barrel end. So I think we're going to be okay. I'm going to chuck this back up in here and we're going to sand it down to get it nice and smooth, and then we'll go from there. That's better. Yeah, 117. Yeah, 115. So we've got a little bit of a taper here. So we may have to file back on the bottom of the post a little bit to get back up to the diameter we want, but we'll see. Alright, so here's our post that I have filed down a bit, and I may have over-filed a little bit on the bottom. So let's take a look and see. Oh yeah, that's much too loose now. I mean, it bottoms out completely in the post. So I tapered it too much. So to fix that, we'll just grind away on the bottom of it until our diameter comes up to what we need. Alright, so I ground away a little bit on the bottom of our post. Oh, getting tighter, so we're getting close to where we want to be. Shouldn't take much more coming off of it. Okay, we've taken a little more off. Well, still a little loose. I want that to be a nice press fit. Alright, a little more grinding. Let's see where we stand. Yeah, there we are. So there we are. So now we've found our right fit for our post. So I'm not going to attempt to press fit this and restake it in place because I will risk damaging the finish of the metal. So instead, I'm going to solder it in place. And so to do that, what we're going to do, first we're going to clean out the pocket really well with some acetone so that there's no grease in there. We'll clean off the base of our pin also, and then we're going to put just a little bit of solder. Well, first we're going to put some flux down inside that pocket, and then we're going to put just a little bit of solder on the bottom of this post. We're going to build up a little bead of solder, and when we do that, then we're going to reseat the sight post, and when we heat it with a torch, that solder will wet out and liquefy and fill in the pocket, and we'll be able to see it around the edge of the post, and then we'll know that we've done it. And the brass is an extremely good conductor of heat, so all you have to do is heat the end of the sight post. The heat will wick down, melt that solder, and we'll have a permanent fixed post. So that's what we're going to do. Okay, we've got some acetone on a Q-tip here, and we're going to clean that out really well. Alright, there's that. And then we'll take our post and we'll clean that front sight post also. Alright, so the first thing we're going to do is we're going to apply some flux to our post. It's going to be our front sight post. And I think I'm going to change the orientation here because I don't want the solder to run down the shaft. I want the solder to stay on the end of the shaft. Alright, so I've applied some solder here to the end of the sight post. And I've got the post horizontal because I don't want the solder to run down the post. I want the solder to stay on the end of the post. So we're going to heat up the post. And that's all it takes, is to get a little bit of solder there. And unfortunately I've got a glob on the bottom of it, and what I really have hanging from the bottom side of it, and what I really want is that solder to be on the bottom of it. So what I'll do here is let it run to the bottom. There we go. Now what we've got is a soldered post. And so we've got some solder on the bottom of this post. And what we'll do is we'll put it back in the drill press and we'll file away all except towards the bottom where we want that tin, because we don't want it to show above the barrel itself. So we're going to clean off some of that solder that's up on the sides of it where we don't want it, and we will then see if it fits in our revolver. Alright, so we've got our revolver back in the vise here, and we've got our tinned and cleaned up sight post, and we're going to see if it fits. And of course the solder has increased its diameter, so it's no longer a nice press fit. But that's okay because the solder is soft. So we're going to get ourselves a hammer, and we're going to tap our sight post into place. Perfect, perfect. Yeah, and we can see here that we're getting a nice good depth, and we still have nice shiny solder, and so that's exactly the kind of interference fit that we're going to want. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is put a tiny amount of flux down into that pocket. Alright, so I've got a tiny amount of flux here on a drill bit, and I'm going to put that down in that post hole. And you don't want to get this on the finish of the gun. I've been told that this flux, because I think it's got acid in it, will harm the bluing or remove the bluing. And we don't want that to happen. So we want to be very careful where we put the flux, and we want to be very sparing with it. Especially since it's going to boil out or want to boil out once we start heating the sight post. So we want to be very, very careful with the amount that we put in there, and we don't want to get it everywhere while we're working. Alright, so here's our post. I've cut it down a little more since it's not going to need to be nearly as tall as it was, and of course it won't be this tall either, but it's a little bit easier to work with. So we've got our bottom of our sight post is tinned, and we've got flux down in the pocket where the original sight was. So now we're going to put this back into place, and we're going to give it some taps. Make sure your vise is good and tight. Okay, so at this point we're going to want to take a look at our post and make sure that it's on straight. So I think that's pretty good. We've got it up and down this way pretty good, and it looks like, if you can see that, it looks like it's pretty straight up and down. Whoops, well, I just knocked it right out of the post hole. So now we get to do it again. Alright, let's check it again. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. So we've got it down the barrel nicely and straight up and down, looking from the side. Pretty nice. So I think we're ready to solder it in place. Alright, so we're going to take our torch and we're going to heat the post itself. We're not heating the barrel, we're heating the post. And we're going to let the heat go down the brass rod until it wicks into that solder and melts the solder. And we're going to watch very carefully and watch that solder flow. Alright, I'm going to stop because I can see the flux oozing out around that rod, and I don't want it to hurt the finish. Alright. Alright, that's almost certainly got it because it started to glow. And again, I can see that flux sweating out around the barrel, and I don't want that to hurt my finish. I'm going to be real careful not to touch it because it will burn you. And that's it. So that should be in there. We're going to let that cool off, and we're going to take a look at it, push it a little bit, make sure that it's in there nice and tight, and then we're going to take a look at our target and figure out exactly how tall of a target do we need. So I've imported a picture of my best group with the Spiller and Burr, which was 12 grains of 3F GoX shot off a bench at 25 yards. And I've imported this picture into a piece of software called OnTarget PC. And it's a really nice piece of software. It's really easy to use. You just bring in a picture of your target and you tell it, here's the bullseye is 4 inches in diameter, for example, and then you tell it, what's your target range, 25 yards, and the size of your bullets, and you just position your bullet holes and tell it where your point of aim was, and it can tell you, everything about your group size, and how far off the target you were. So you can see that we're about 12.9 inches above our point of aim. So now we will use this information in the Brownell's sight adjustment calculator to figure out how much taller our front sight needs to be. So from the Brownell sight correction tool here, which is available online, we've input our various parameters. So we know that our amount of error is 12.896 inches away from our point of aim. Our sight radius, which is the distance between the front sight and rear sight, is 7.75 inches on the Spiller and Burr revolver, and the distance to target is 25 yards or 900 inches. And according to the calculator, our correction is 0.111 inches. Now, the thing you want to remember is called FORS, front, opposite, rear, same. And what that means is if you want your bullets, in our case, to go down, then the front sight would have to move up. If we were modifying the rear sight, then it would move down to be the same, but we're doing the front sight. So our front sight post needs to go up an additional 0.11 inches above where it was. And it was originally about 0.125 inches tall. So that means our new front sight post needs to be 0.236 inches tall, or roughly a quarter of an inch, 0.25. So we're going to make our front sight post about 0.25 inches, and that'll leave me some extra material to file off at the range to get to the correct point of aim. Alright, so now that we've got our front sight post soldered in and trimmed to about a quarter inch, so I went to use the Brownell sight adjustment tool, and I put in our sight radius, which is 7 3/4 of an inch. 25 yard was what we were shooting at, and when I used the OnTarget software, I was about 12.9 inches shooting high. So when I fed that information into the Brownell's sight adjustment tool, it told me I needed to raise that front sight post about 0.111 inches. Well, the original front sight post was about 0.25 inches, so we're looking at, the original front sight post was about 0.125 inches tall, about 1/8 of an inch tall. So we're going to need a front sight that's about a quarter of an inch tall, which is what I assumed we would need based on other revolvers that I've done. So we now have our post in place, and I've redressed up the front of the barrel with some more electrical tape. So now I'm going to do like on the original front post, and I'm going to file this guy into a V, an inverted V. So we want to go very careful, and I'm not going to get too fine a point on it because we've got to shoot it at the range and see where we're at. And I'm certainly not going to take any material off the top of it because, again, we're going to have to sight this thing in, and I've deliberately made the sight a little tall for that reason. And here's how we ended up. It turned out pretty good, all things considered. I think the solder could have been a little bit cleaner around the base of the front sight post, but I think it's going to be plenty good enough for our target purposes. So this will be an n-ssa legal front sight post modification to this Spiller and Burr, as we have preserved the original configuration of the front sight post. Originally it was a small 1/8 inch diameter cone-shaped front post, and it still will be that similar configuration of an 1/8 inch diameter post. It'll just be a little bit taller so that it will shoot the point of aim at 25 yards. So, if you've enjoyed this video, I hope you'll click the like button down below and subscribe if you want to stay notified of future Musket Matter videos. Thanks again for watching.